Silverstone. This small village perched on one of the Low English hills 5 kilometers south of Touchester owes its truly worldwide fame to the racetrack of the same name built next to it in 1948. Motorsport fans have even come up with a legend, according to which the place got its name, which means Silverstone, precisely because of the circuit, which has become one of the greatest jewels in the treasury of British motorsport. Notice, not a diamond, not a pearl, and not a gold mine, but a stone. Foundation stone. In fact, the name of the village in the wooded hills of Northamptonshire comes centuries ago from the word Silverstone, which means woodland in Old English. But in any case, one cannot live in modern world with only one legendary past. And although this is just a legend, Silverstone truly laid the so-called foundation of Formula One. Yes, the history of Formula One begins with Silverstone Circuit in England. It was there that on May 13, 1950, on the track laid along the runways of the former military airfield, the first race was held as part of the new championship. If we deviate a little from the official chronicle, then the history of Silverstone began like many great events in Worcestershire pub on a September evening in 1947. It was there that several body racers gathered to discuss over a mug of something intoxicated where to hold the race. The problem was very relevant in the post-war period. Devastation reigned everywhere, although motorsport was already popular before the Second World War. Almost nothing remained of the circuits where the competition were held. Then one of the friends who lived in the village of Silverstone remembered that there was an abandoned airfield nearby. It was built in 1943 and belonged to the Royal Air Force of Great Britain. However, it wasn't used after the war.
Literally the day after meeting in the pub, 11 racers had their first race at Silverstone Airfield. The competition went down in history as a Lamb Grand Prix. The fact is that one of the drivers shot down a sheep that accidentally wandered onto the airfield.
Come on! Get up! Hey!
As a result of the collision, the animal died, the car was damaged, and the rider had to retire. However, no other results after these competitions were recorded. It's only known that the local farmer was compensated for the sheep.
The official history of Silverstone begins a little later. October 2, 1948, the Royal Automobile Club began looking for a venue for the National Grand Prix. The choice fell on the airfield in Northamptonshire, as it was in the very center of England. It was easy to get to, it was surrounded by a decent network of roads. There was plenty of room for spectators. Then the club had to knock on the doors of the Defense Department.
They say the military was reluctant to agree, and the first field lease contract was signed only for 1 year. Nevertheless, this was enough to hold the first official competitions. The Royal Automobile Club hired former farmer James Wilson Brown to prepare the international track. Brown was given only 2 months.
The track was marked with hay bales and gasoline barrels. The quality of the pavement left much to be desired. Along the edge of the track there were still signal lights for aircraft. However, already on October 2, 1948, 100,000 spectators watched how 23 drivers protected from the public fields and pig farms by bales of hay and ropes fought for victory along the runways. The fastest was Maserati by Luigi Villaresi, an Italian race car driver, a future Formula One driver. A start was made, and in 1949 the International Automobile Federation decided to establish a world championship including the most prestigious National Grand Prix. At first the races were held directly on the runways, but since 1949 it was decided to use the perimeter of the airfield for the track. The first stage of the Formula One Championship was held a year later, on May 13, 1950 at Silverstone. For the first and only time, the Grand Prix was visited by an acting monk, George VI. It was the time of Italian dominance on the tracks. The Silverstone race was held in front of 100,000 spectators, and with the complete dominance of the Alfa Romeo factory team's 158 cars. Its drivers, Nino Farina, Juan Manuel Fangio and Luigi Fagioli, occupied the entire podium. Farina, nicknamed the Gentleman of Turin, later became the first Formula One champion. The victory in that race was won by Giuseppe Nino Farina.
Silverstone's configuration was often criticized. This track was called hopelessly outdated, inconvenient for spectators and participants, bringing only losses to the organizers. It got to the point that Bernie Ecclestone threatened to completely exclude the circuit from Formula One, as disgracing the reputation of the world's leading motorsport power. However, in the eyes of F1 fans, Silverstone was and remains a legend. And, in an attempt to please the authorities of Formula One, the scheme of the circuit changed 9 times. As we have already discussed at the beginning, the races were held directly on the runways. But since 1949, it was decided to use the perimeter of the airfield. The 1915 and 1951 British Grand Prix were run on this variant of circus.
Then the start-finish line was moved from the straight farm to the straight between the turns Woodcote and Copse. In this form, the configuration of the autodrome lasted until 1975. During these years, Silverstone has established itself as a very safe track, and the most terrible accident was considered to be the blockage of Jody Scheckter in 1973. Already on the first lap of the race, Jody Scheckter lost control of his McLaren, spun, hit the pit wall, and caused the biggest accident in the history of Silverstone. Fortunately, Formula One safety standards have become noticeably stricter over the years. Although 9 cars were injured in the accident and left the track, only one driver was injured. In 1975, a chicane was made at the Woodcote turn. In this form, the track existed until 1987, when the bridge turn was changed. At the 1985 British Grand Prix, Keke Rosberg completed the qualifying lap in 1:05.591 with an average speed of 258.983 km/h. This average speed was the highest on a lap in Formula One until 2002. Another impressive race took place on July 12, 1987. Williams teammates Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet fought for the first place until the last seconds. Mansell had trouble balancing the tire in the middle of the race, and on the last lap the fuel gauge came close to zero. But the Briton took a chance, went to the finish line to the last and eventually crossed the ribbon first, not finishing the slow circle due to lack of fuel. Thousands of fans ran onto the track welcoming the brilliant driver. So, as a result, in 1987 the track at Silverstone became the fastest in Formula One calendar. However, for safety and speed reasons, the track underwent a major upgrade ahead of 1991 race. As a result, this Grand Prix has become one of the most memorable. Speeds on track dropped, giving Nigel Mansell in the Williams car a chance to take on Ayrton Senna's McLaren. The Briton won pole position during the race, broke away from Senna by 10 seconds. The Brazilian tried to attack with less fuel in the tanks, close the gap, but on the last lap his car ran out of fuel. Mansell drove Senna to the finish line in his car, causing ecstasy in his native audience.
After tightening safety requirements and after the death of Ayrton Senna at the San Marino Grand Prix, Silverstone underwent a major modification. Despite the changes, the track remains fast.
And here is one of the main curiosities of Silverstone, which is associated with Michael Schumacher. At the finish of the race in 1998, an incident happened. Schumacher, in full confidence that he needed to go one more lap, drove into the pits to serve his sentence, a 5-second stop and go, thereby crossing the finish line. However, the driver was notified about the penalty 2 laps before the end of the race, which is a violation of the regulations. Therefore, it was decided to consider the result at the time of Schumacher's finish in the pit lane as legitimate. Stop and go was replaced by adding a few seconds to Michael's time, which still didn't affect the final position. But in 1999, Schumacher wasn't lucky at Silverstone. On the first lap, the brakes failed on his car, and the car crashed into a bump stop. The rider suffered a double leg fracture.
The traditional English weather also adds to the complexity of the track. Rains with strong gusts of wind aren't uncommon during British Grand Prix, and such a feature almost became fatal for Silverstone. Usually, the trip from London to the circuit takes about an hour. However, in the days of Grand Prix, the same track could stretch for an indefinite period due to traffic jams, from 3 to 7 hours. The problem of traffic jams became especially acute on the racing weekend of 2000, which was memorable for its showers, when the English stage was postponed for some unknown reason to the spring. The events on track unfolded very interesting, but what was happening on the surrounding roads far exceeds the race itself in terms of drama. It rained over Silverstone for 3 weeks. The fields all around turned into a quagmire. In anticipation of Sunday's influx of 28,000 car spectators, authorities closed car parks on Saturday. Those who ran to see the qualification abandoned their cars and kneaded the dirt with their feet, making their way to the autodrome by circuitous paths. As a result, instead of the expected 60,000, only 50,000 people were present in the stands. The night before the race, rush trucks dumped 300 tons of gravel into mud, dissolving like a pinch of salt in a swamp. On Easter Sunday, a miracle happened. 3 weeks of rain over Northamptonshire stopped. However, a thick fog fell to the ground, which didn't improve the situation. Tractors in public parking lots tossed and turned in the mud like Old Testament hippos. A man in a GPS Lotus jacket raised his hands to the sky, calling Noah to build him a boat.
Mr. Gibbs, any particular reason why my ship is gone? The ship? We're on the ship. Jack! The ship's gone! Really?
After such events, Bernie Ecclestone set a condition for owners of the track. Either they take measures to reorganize the circuit or they lose the right to host the Grand Prix. As a result, Octagon Motorsport was founded in January 2001 by Sir Frank Lowe, founding president of the UK's largest sport marketing corporation, Octagon Worldwide. With the blessing of British Racing Club president Sir Jackie Stewart, Octagon Motorsport secured the rights to a 15-year Silverstone loan. The main condition of this agreement was Octagon's investment in the reconstruction of Silverstone. Thus began the reconstruction of parking lots and access roads, and the first part of the master plan, which provides for the construction of a new 4-lane 25-mile road, which passing through Silverstone will connect the two major highways, M1 and M40, thus providing unhindered access to the circuit from two directions at once, will be completed only in June 2002. And now 2003 brought a new incident. The race is remembered not so much for the victory of Rubens Barrichello as for antics of Neil Horan. On lap 11, a defrocked Irish priest jumped out of the track and ran into traffic bearing posters with religious slogans. The run was interrupted by the marshal, who was able to catch up and push Horan over the side of the road. The violator received 2 months in prison, the marshal an award for bravery. Once again, Silverstone has come under renewed criticism. Due to the outdated infrastructure of the circuit, the 2010 British Grand Prix was planned to be held in Donington, but it didn't meet the construction deadlines and the race was hosted by Silverstone, updated by the time. On May 17, 2011, the track received a new complex of boxes and paddock named Wynn and located between the Cup and Abbey turns. The autodrome can accommodate up to 100,000 people. Most of stands are open and equipped with TV monitors. In addition, spectators can hear the commentator on the radio. In addition to racing, other spectacular events are held at the autodrome, the annual festival of antique technology, a car auction, and etc. Yeah, the autodrome has been modified and updated many times, but the main outlines have remained almost unchanged, and the key turns in general can lead a short tour of the surrounding of the track. By the way, do you know where in England the biggest fines for traffic violations? At Silverstone. It will cost you £15,000 if you ever think of driving backwards in the pit lane during a race. Yeah, Silverstone may surprise us not only with how often its configuration has changed, but also with strong crosswinds, changeable English weather. But F1 fans are special people. They are ready to endure rain and heat, endure the inconvenience of cabin life, spend the night under open sky, get to the autodromes located in the middle of nowhere, and at the same time not to lose their inherent energy and cheerfulness. The only thing they don't tolerate well is thirst. But with this at Silverstone, as indeed at any other circuit in the world, there were no problems.